Um, Not me. I did go to the University of Kentucky, so if you're a UK person, I got that going. um, but yeah, thinking of just bone health in general, um, there hasn't been much said, and if you kind of do a quick Google search, you might even kind of come up and say this is kind of a silent disease, mainly because the way our infrastructure is currently in the medical world, we don't really get any screening until 65, right? When technically we hit peak bone mineral density at what age? Do you guys think? Yeah, 25, 30 typically, right? Is the age that if you look at if you go back to the definition of osteoporosis, which does anybody have a technical definition that they want to shout out? I like I'm a engaging kind of, as you can tell by no PowerPoint. But if you look at it, just you do a quick search on it, it's going to be if your T score is negative 2.5 or greater into the negatives. And that's your bone mineral density score from a DEXA scan that you would get. So 2.5 standard deviations away from the mean. And that is going to relate you to essentially a 30-year-old version of yourself. So how much have you declined since you're 30? If you really want to get technical with that, right? Now, I think we've all kind of assumed that this is just naturally happens. This is supposed to happen. I think that's kind of the way in which it's presented. I don't think it has to be taken so literally. Obviously, with hormonal changes, menopause, perimenopause, things aren't exactly in, physiological favor of maintaining bone. But there are lots of things that can be done before that, during that, and much after that you can build up actually a regrown bone. So it's amazing what your body can do regardless of age. And with exercise and strength specifically, you can see crazy improvements. So which a lot of you guys probably have that are exercising now. It's such a key part to it. I always like to address too when we start, and this was like the first thing that remind me of your name. Mona said was, and this might be a similar experience to you guys, is when you got your first DEXA scan, and you found out if you were osteopenic, osteoporotic, and the conversation that was led immediately following that was, you're probably terrified of your body now. You're told not to pick anything up, not to bend over anymore, don't lift anything heavier than 5 pounds. Right? So don't rotate, don't twist. Basically, be terrified of your body. Essentially, is kind of what a lot of conversations go. When I think it should be almost the exact opposite of that. I think that's where, when you look into other means of how can I approach this outside of traditional medicine, which is typically just going to offer you some kind of a drug that can maybe address bone loss, which I don't want to dive too much into that because we're talking about exercise today. But it should really be a reversal of conversation of, this is a great opportunity for you to really take the time, if you have it, which I think we can all make some time for it, but to approach it head on and figure out, well, why did this happen to me? Are there some things that I can maybe change with my daily routine that can attack this head on? Do it in a way that is approachable. I think that's key. Do it in a way that you can implement in your everyday life and something that you can connect with and see a long-term future with. And that's, exercise in a nutshell if you're going to change positive. So that's how I like to spin it, is if you do have that fear, I totally understand it because of the 1,000+ people I've talked to after the initial diagnosis. That is 95% of the conversations that I have. So you're definitely not, you're not alone in this venture. I think having a community, having you guys here right now, at least talking about it, being aware of it, that's the start of, you're not on an island. Okay, it's a scary place to be on an island, especially for your health. So, exercise-wise, what really causes bone to change? How does it grow? Even at 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. Stress, there we go. What kind of stress? What kind of stress does the bone like to see? I love that, right? So she said pulling the tendon pulling against the bone, weight. There's a fancy term that we'd like to just call it mechanical loading. Impact. We'll talk about impact too. That's a good one. I'm glad you brought that up. So different versions that your bone likes to see. Mechanical loading is one, right? It can be different versions of that. It can be compression, right? You put weight on your back, you hold weight where essentially you're being pulled down with more force towards the ground, you get compression, right? The bone can also experience rotation, right? So compression with some kind of torsion, it likes to see that to some level, depending on how much and what you're actually doing. And it likes to see different rates of loading, and that's where the impact comes in, right? Acceleration and deceleration. So those are the actual stressors that your bone sees as a stimulus, and then it reports back to your nervous system of, okay, that was different maybe than what I normally experience, but it needs more than, you think it needs more than one time to experience that, to start changing? Just people that exercise, can you come in and exercise one time and then you're immediately fit? Be awesome, right? It would definitely speed the process up to you kind of being a little more maybe addicted in a good way to exercise, but it needs that kind of repetitive stimulus to understand. It really needs to understand what are the demands, and then how much and where can I make the changes to meet those demands. And then small changes happens over time. Then all of a sudden, the same thing that you do no longer gives you the same benefit, right? And you start talking, I'm sure Lucy has talked about this before, it starts with a P. Progressive overload. Yeah, she's probably heard that before, right? So you have to progressively make changes, and you can do that many different ways, which we'll dive into. But you're always kind of finding out what's the borderline of what does my body understand? What's the next little bit of a level of difficulty to continue making those adaptations to? That's kind of what the bone needs to see. Compression, rotation. If you think about like a long bone, if you're loading, it might see some deflection, right? Those changes that the bone is going to experience. And then that rate, it needs to see more rapid loading phases, and that's where impact comes into play. We'll give some examples that we can all try. That's really safe, kind of a gateway into impact. Fun. So that's a little bit of an understanding. I think it makes sense to kind of think about what are we actually doing when we start talking about these exercises that have the biggest influence on seeing adaptation to bone. So if you had to guess, what are some movements that come to mind that can do all those things we just talked about? Walking. Good question. Yeah. Good question. What do you guys think? Is walking enough of an impact? Yoga. Okay. Like that. Pilates. Thanks. Strength training. For sure. Lifting weight. Yeah, 100%, right? I'll give you some examples. When you think about adaptations to bone, they normally need to see and perceive around 4 times your body weight in force to see changes in bone. Experience 4 times your body weight acceleration due to gravity. Normally walking, depending on the speed at which you're walking, is somewhere around 1 to 1.5 times your body weight. That's all we're experiencing. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say nobody's ever seen improvements in bone from walking, because there definitely have been. But the biggest difficulty with walking is it's very challenging to progressively overload walking. Right? Anything very cyclical in nature that your body gets to experience repetition after repetition after repetition, it can adapt to really quickly. If you don't give it that next level of what needs to change, then it says, all right, I don't need to adapt any further unless you're going to make anything different to it. Okay, so walking is fantastic. If you're not walking, it's something to consider. If you are walking, I'm never going to say don't stop walking. There's so many great health benefits, cardiovascular comorbidities, all the things. It's a fantastic method for exercise. So keep doing it, but is it enough for bone? Likely it's not. Okay. Pilates and yoga, fantastic for balance, muscle activation, breathing, flexibility, range of motion, all those things that we decline quickly in as we age if we're not really training it, mainly due to adaptations with our joints and our tendons and our ligaments to become more stiff. We lose our capacity to be functional. Are they enough of a loading on the bone? I think, great question. Yeah, I have a lot of clients that use that, and I say it's fantastic. Definitely, use it. I love the way it engages core, glutes, hips, breathing. It all kind of brings everything together. But it kind of goes back to, you get to a point to where you're not really increasing the challenge as far as For sure. You definitely can. Yeah, it's a great place to start too if you're never had much loading before. In terms of like comparing, different movements and resistance training to that, it's a big jump for some people to go from never doing it to those movements. So great way to start entertaining some loading. I don't know a ton of the research on it as far as using specific Pilates only, reformer only to predicted improvements on bone mineral density, but I think it's a fantastic exercise for sure. You do. That's a good point.
Weightlifting, Pilates, yoga, walking.
All the things.
All
that's a good point.
That's
love that. Yeah, the more you can do, the better, right? The more you engage with your body. All right, so we had all those different ones: resistance training, Pilates, walking. What about running? What do you guys think about running? You enjoy running? Yeah. Do you think it's enough impact to change noticeable, measurable change in bone mineral density? Yeah. In a good way or a bad way? They're flat as a pancake. Very similar. And you actually become more efficient as time goes on with running, just like walking. So you're using less energy as you're physically doing it, and your feet become more adaptive to where they're dissipating the forces better the more and more you run, right? So running's an interesting one because if you're a really big heel striker, you can see 4 times body weight, right? So there's that, right? I've also, the more you think about it on the physiological side, which is super interesting, I've got some people that I work with that are in their 30s that were competitive runners. This is kind of the very far end of the spectrum, but at least gives you some insight of what's going on internally. Where if you think about your past in, your nutritional status and how much energy you were putting out, right? So a lot of the distance runners, competitive gymnasts, where body weight is a premium, sometimes not always done at the best way, right? Remember nutritional value, which nutritionally was very low, energy expenditure very high. Most of those people really never achieved peak bone mineral density. And I've got women in their 30s that are severely osteoporotic. Very fit, extremely fit, exercise their entire life, but to the nature of the sport and their energy expenditure. So your body, when you think about running, if you'd like to run a lot, one of the ways in which your body adapts is to get good at running. Do you want to weigh more or weigh less? You want to weigh less, right? So some things that might happen is you might deload bone and muscle in the process at the expense of being more efficient. Your body always works towards being as efficient as possible. And that sometimes means you want to just take a nap, right? It wants to sit and do nothing. That's just going to speak to the efficiency of our bodies. So running is a big one. I get a question on that. Another big question I get is, what about a weighted vest? I mean, you guys have all probably seen, I don't know what influencer or what happened, but weighted vests just went through the roof, right? They're so popular. What do you guys think about that? What are your thoughts on, should you experiment with one? Is it enough? Has anybody tried one?
more likely you're gonna fall.
It could definitely, if you,
I guess it would make you walking is more weight to your stride.
for sure. Yeah, if you weigh more, you can have more force going to the ground, right? Yeah, get a few donuts, internal weighted vest. But yeah, no, there's quite a bit of research on weighted vest, and from what I've seen, likely not going to make much of a difference. And more often than not, it ends up being more of a negative influence because you're immediately putting on additional weight without adding the infrastructure of, AKA, I increase my muscle mass to support this weight, right? So you just put on an extra 10 or 15 pounds of pure fat. That's what your body's perceiving it, without actually increasing your body weight in terms of muscle mass. And then if you're repetitively walking with more weight, it could cause some issues at the joint or soft tissue, and likely not going to be enough of an impact to make a big difference in the bone side of things. Great question. If we think about loading, most of the time we're talking about it to make a difference from bone health. We're trying to either directly load our spine or indirectly load it to where we get some compression through the spine. So if I weight on my ankles, it has no influence on what's actually happening at hip, pelvis, and spine, right? Just kind of way more. Probably messes your gait more than anything. But weighted vest, the best way that I've used a weighted vest for a lot of my women that I work with is they get to a point with many exercises that their legs become stronger than what their grip strength allows. Right? It is hard. So if you're doing a farmer's carry or maybe a goblet squat or a weighted step up, your grip strength is exceeded pretty quickly, right? But your legs are still going. So a great time is you can add the weight that you're normally doing, find that spot where your grip strength is still, you can achieve it, and then put your weighted vest on, because now we get some direct spinal loading. It's close to our center of mass. We can do those movements where, our torso is upright and it's not going to affect our technique. So a great way to use your weighted vest if you have one, probably the best way to use it compared to walking. So if you haven't gotten one yet and you feel like you're in that spot where, man, I could do more weight, I just can't hold it, my hands, it's an easy way to start using it. Great question. That's a fantastic question. Glad you asked that. Have you had that before? Yeah. Is it reoccurring, or have you healed and were able? Have you? Yeah. All the things. Yeah. That is a lot of gray area, I would say. In how do you approach, if you have had, compression fracture or any kind of spinal injury, how do you approach, loading? Because you're going to hear load the spine, got to load the spine, got to lift heavy, all those things, when almost directly opposite of like what you've been told or thought to do. So normally I'm never going to recommend, and I rarely have people, do direct spinal loading beyond, even if it's weighted vest, because you can still load many other ways that still give you just as much benefit. Oh, vibration plate. Yeah. Great question. Yeah, really good question. And I do recommend those a lot for someone that's kind of in your situation where you're really worried about spinal, issues. Is vibration, you have to look into the actual producer of the equipment, because you can get one on Amazon for $300. Likely not going to be enough impact, so it's kind of a simulating impact. One of the probably the best ones, if you're looking into buying this, I get a lot of questions on this, is a company called PowerPlate. They've done a ton of research, even back 20 years ago when I was in school. They were doing PowerPlate research, but they probably have the best equipment to where they have actual research you can go and look up, and they found that, I think it comes down to consistency. Basically using this, their protocol is like 10 minutes a day, is most days of the week. In a year, what could you expect to see improvements on? And their data go at maybe 3 or 4% improvements in intensity based off of vibration. So sounds familiar. Yeah. Vibration plate. I have seen those. Yeah. Yeah. Osteoboost. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a product, Osteoboost, and it's a belt form, correct? I've seen these before. Yeah. Potential. Yeah. But there's good research on vibration. It really comes down to consistency, and if the actual frequency is enough to stimulate a change. So there's definitely other methods out there aside from traditional medicine that you can look into. But resistance training is resistance training and impact training. Those are the two that I probably spend the most amount of time in anybody that I work with. So
I have a question.
yes.
So what would you say for someone who's like a wear and tear? Working the muscles, that's what they associate wear and tear on the joint. So they're scared to strength train, to do impact work because of the idea of wearing and tearing their joints.
Wow, great question. Let's see what's got. Yeah. No, it's a real fear, and you're going to hear it, and it really comes down to, finding the appropriate entry point as far as exercise prescription, right? What movements are you initially using to build some strength around the joints that you're worried about injuring, right? And how do you slowly build strength over time to where you don't have a setback? So that's the big. If you have a setback, we're going to have time off. Time off is going to result in decrements to either our strength or our capacity. So it really comes down to programming and starting off at the appropriate level. I don't know if that answers your question. On the resistance training side, we talked about, a lot of questions we'll hear are, what movements are going to influence the biggest change? How do I approach those exercises? Do I need to quote unquote lift heavy? That's a big one you get all the time because you're going to hear that. It's kind of a buzzword, lift heavy. And how do I appropriately load the spine? Right? Those all kind of sound terrifying. You've never exercised or resistance training before. Lift heavy, load the spine, impact. These all sound like I'm not doing any of those things, right? So it's a little tricky because you were probably told not to do anything, and then someone else is telling you to do the exact opposite times 10. So first off, lifting heavy, that's a relative term because heavy for somebody is going to be a warm up for somebody else. If it's 5 pounds and that's challenging for 8 or 10 or 12 repetitions, that's fine. It's just the weight is a number. We almost have to recondition our minds of, I don't care what that number says. I'm chasing a certain level of difficulty with each exercise. If my goal is if Lucy says, hey, let's get 10 reps on the shoulder press, and I want you to maybe get 2 more before you said, I can't do this anymore, right? I'm close to failure. Doesn't matter if it's 100 pounds or 5 pounds. Okay, we're chasing a certain level of difficulty. So that to me is super freeing because as soon as I realize the number doesn't matter, and it's like I can just kind of tap into the movement, feel it, and kind of work with it. Right? There's a lot of freedom in that. So I think that kind of really attacks that kind of lift heavy situation. Well, how much, how many repetitions? There's all the questions. So if you really look at the literature on this, most of the best research is going to say if you can get 2 to ideally 3 times per week of some kind of progressive resistance training program where you're doing a kind of a full body, doing a lot of the compound exercises, which I'll give you some really good ones to include in your program if you're not doing it now, at somewhere of a level of maybe 75 to 85% of what you could do one time. So if you're not sure what that looks like, most of the time it's somewhere in the range of 8 to 12 repetitions where you're close to failure at that range. Okay, that's been shown to be enough of a stimulus to obviously really improve strength. You can really improve muscle mass and really grow a lot of muscle in that level of challenge. It also is great because it's not to the point where it's super taxing on the joint and soft tissue. Once we start getting to where we're doing maybe like a 5 repetition maximum or 3 repetition maximum, like where you're really, really pushing yourself, that's when you're really taxing those soft tissue areas or joints you might be working. So it's kind of a great happy medium of I can see improvement. It's challenging, but it's not such a great of an influence on my nervous system and my soft tissues to where I'm going to be, the next 2 days after a workout, I can't move. So that's not a good situation.
What are the signals from the body that you're going too far? That you're doing something you shouldn't be doing?
That's a good question. Have you had any?
Signals? Yeah.
Are you getting some signals?
Pain.
Yeah.
For one.
Yeah. Pain's a tricky one. Usually, if you're consistent and you're doing like some kind of a program And when you start with that program, you might be sore for 24, 48 hours after, and it gradually starts to get less in terms of your stiffness or soreness. And then maybe after 2, 3, 4 months, your level of soreness and stiffness is reduced even after like a difficult workout. That's a really good sign. If you continue to really be sore long after a workout, even if you're really consistent, you're doing very similar movements, very similar, level of intensity, and you're still really sore, or it's taking you longer to recover, or you have pain where you didn't normally have, then it's like maybe or you're not sleeping as well as you used to. Those are some indicators of maybe I'm working a little bit harder than I need to be. Right.
So that means just slow it down back.
Yeah, you could either reduce your volume, how much work you're doing, the intensity, how much weight you're lifting, maybe reducing the number of movements you're doing in a workout until you find that happy. And it's going to ebb and flow because your nervous system is always changing and adapting. So you could do one workout one day and feel great, and then do the exact same workout 2 weeks later, but you're on the floor the next 3 days. Right? It could be just the stress you have elsewhere. It could be a number of things, but if you're looking long term, you want to find that happy medium of challenging myself, but the day or 2 days following, I can still be mobile without being so sore and stiff, noticing my recover capacity decline.
It also sounds to me like I don't just do this, I do this under a trainer.
Sure. Yeah. Is that what you do now? No. No, you can, depending on, where you are and your level of trust with yourself, how much you're willing to push yourself. Sometimes it's nice to have an extra set of eyeballs.
But the value of a trainer is starting point, understanding. You tell me what the value is.
Exactly. Yeah. The starting point's a big one. Understanding when and how to progress you is a big one. Seeing the signs that you might not pick up on. Changing your technique to where you might get more out of a movement. Be more efficient at something. So there's lots of, could be motivational, could be all kinds of things too. I've lost my train of thought. Where was I, Lucy?
How do you?
We're talking resistance training, like the
Yeah.
level of intensity.
But fueling, I think, is one that not a lot of people think of. What do you tell your people
On
about
fueling?
so
Yeah.
they can recover?
For sure. So that the biggest one that is the easiest to probably start tracking, and this is, I gotta check my time here. I could talk here for 4 hours and you haven't figured that out yet. Easiest one to start tracking, because if you dive down the nutritional rabbit hole, it can get very overwhelming. So keep it as simple as possible to start. Easiest thing to start tracking if you never have before is to get somewhat of a baseline on maybe your protein intake, your daily protein intake. And yeah,
That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, it's if you've never, there's a couple of, Chronometer is a good app, it's a free app. My Fitness Pal is another one. And I wouldn't recommend doing this all the time. It's nice to do for a 2 or 3 day stretch of getting an idea of where your baseline is, so you can make changes from. But most of the time, at least when I've worked with people, they're very much so under eating protein. If you look at the guidelines, don't pay attention to the ones from US Gov because they're extremely low. But realistically, you're likely somewhere, and the conversion is in kilograms. If you're active and you're resistance training and you're walking and you're hiking and you're doing all the things that you want to do, you probably need somewhere around 1.8 to 2 grams per kilogram body weight. And that's somewhere decently close to 1 gram per pound of your body weight, or somewhere around 1 gram per pound of your ideal body weight. Whether you're ideal or not, that's hard. That's a tough conversation. So if you're 130 pounds right now, maybe try and get somewhere around 100 grams of protein a day. And you're like, wow, I have no idea where I am to start with, but you start tracking and you have 40 or 50 and you're like, oh my gosh, am I going to double this? I don't just start gorging and double it in one day. Give your body a little bit of a chance to understand what more protein looks like and how to digest it and use it, figure out where it needs to go. So gradually increase that. And I always love to start with well, what's your favorite meal? Let's try and optimize that meal. Let's try and get 30 to 35 grams of protein in that meal. Once you get really good at that, go to the next one. Yeah. Great question. The recommendation is yes. Yeah, for sure. And if you're active, even more so. So if you look at like the USDA standard currently, I think it's still 0.8 grams per kilogram per day, which is like, that's like nothing. It's like eating a blade of grass, right? And if you look at their recommendation for, I think older than 62, it goes up to 1.3 grams per kilogram. So it's definitely increased even from those standards, but realistically it's somewhere around, so one kilogram is 2.2 pounds. So if you're 1.8 to 2.2 grams per kilogram, it's, you have to mess around the math on that a little bit, but maybe just make a goal of around 100 grams per day ish. If you track it and see where you are, I'd be super impressed if everybody was close to that number. Everything. It seriously is. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up about adding weight, because if we're trying to build bone, can we build bone and be weight stable or lose weight? It's not going to happen, right? We have to be in an anabolic state where there's enough resources on board to actually grow from. And if you're losing weight or somewhere around maintaining weight, it's going to be tough, right?
Yeah, I tell clients here, like I would rather them gain a little bit of weight while they're figuring out their protein that will help you also build muscle. Because in order to build muscle and lose body fat, you have to be so perfect on nutrition. You have to track everything. And most people are not there.
It's a lot.
And so for long-term health, which is a really hard thing mentally, is I would rather have someone gain a little bit of weight, figure out their protein, increase their metabolism, because that's what drives your metabolism is more muscle, and then start dialing in their nutrition.
Love that. It's simple enough, right?
Easier said than done.
It is easier said than done, yeah. And yeah, at the same time too, I always like to bring up, we talk a lot about bone and how do we change bone, how can it adapt. We forget about all the things that we're doing, and one of the biggest protectors for our bones is muscle mass, right? Your strength, your muscle mass, your capacity for balance and mobility, all of those things are your top tier priority protectors of bone, right? The stronger you get, the more functional you become, the less likely you are to have an event where you might be worried about a fracture, right? Or an injury that's going to set you back. So if you're putting on weight, we're hoping, if you're doing the right things, like, exercising and resistance training, all the things, hoping some of that weight's muscle mass. It likely is. That's a good thing, right? It helps us in some ways. So the movements that really are going to help us the most, this is kind of the fun part. There's a really kind of a groundbreaking study that was done in 2018, and it's called the Lift-More trial, LIFTMOR. And I always use this as a reference because it's one of the few studies we have where zero medication was done, and the average of the subjects in the study in the group that actually did their trial saw improvement in bone mineral density, and without any medication, without any hormone, anything, just exercise and likely diet. But it was an 8-month trial. Think about this, where for 2 times a week for 8 months, the subjects in the trial did barbell back squat, barbell deadlift, barbell overhead shoulder press, and a pretty intensive impact training exercise, which I'll talk about that in a second. Those are their 4 main lifts, and they did those at around 85% of their 1 rep max, 5 sets of 5 repetitions for all of them. So it's like kind of a lot, right? And if you've never done a barbell movement, probably not the easiest thing to start with, so not super approachable from a, how do I get into that perspective? However, that stimulus was enough to see a pretty good change, like 6, 7, 8, up to 10% change of bone mineral density. That's incredible. Okay. Now, The bar is 45 pounds. Just the bar. Just the bar. Yeah, 45. And they were all at the weight they were using was all relative to what their 1 rep max was, right? So it could have been 180 pounds for one person, it could be 45 for the other person. Right? These were people with, they had osteopenia. I don't think they let anybody in with osteoporosis, just probably from a risk standpoint. I have to go back and look at that because it's a pretty long study. 8 months. 8 months. Because when you look at bone turnover, it takes at least 4 months to see like actual change taking place. Typically it takes at least 8 months to see measurable change. So they use that as their guideline for 8 months. It's tough to get for participants to stay that into it for 8 months because that's a lot of work. You know, deadlift, back squat, shoulder press, impact at that level of intensity for 8 months. That's some work. But the changes were, I mean, fantastic. So it's a great reference point to say, hey, look what exercise that can do to the bone and the strength, regardless of anything else. Now, is that super approachable? 90% of the people I work with, I would never say, right now, go do lift more stuff. They don't have the movement capacity, don't have the movement technique, never touched a barbell before. The loading at that level of intensity right away is going to be too much. So that's where I talk about the entry point. Got to find that right entry point, the progression. So I just say, hey, this is a nice reference that we have. Look what exercise can do. We can get you to somewhere close to that. Maybe it's not the best fit for you because I've had a lot of people that never touched a barbell that saw improvements that good or better. Okay. Now, when you dove into the details of the study, that impact exercise was what really drove up changes in bone. The resistance training and the strength they built likely bulletproof their body enough to withstand the forces of a higher intensity impact exercise. So they go hand in hand. Like if you're only doing impact and doing no strength, at some point the wheels are going to fall off. Likely, maybe not, but at some point you're probably going to have something that's not great. You got to be strong enough and resilient enough to impact. The impact exercise they did was they all kind of did this, and they put a bar at the level of the person's hand. They had them jump and pull up at the bar, and then come down. That was an impact. So you're like pulling yourself up as you're jumping, and then coming down and landing in a pretty athletic position. Pretty high impact, right? It's pretty good. But that was a great driver for seeing changes in bone. Now, not a great entry point for most people. Okay. Yeah. And I've tried it before, and I hate it just for the fact that I have no visual cues of where I'm landing. That's a big one. I need to see where I'm landing right away, or this is not good for me. Right? Especially if you're learning how to jump and land. So impact is huge. What is impact? Is it jumping up to a box? Is it stepping off and landing on a box? Is it both? What do we think? Yeah, the landing part, right? Because I've had people saying, well, I'm doing box jumps. I'm like, well, how do you get down from the box? Well, I very gingerly step off the box. Well, you're not doing impact. You're doing fantastic neuromuscular power strength movements, but you're not getting any impact, right? So it's the actual landing force. So this is one we can, if you wanted to, if you need to get up and move a little bit, it's kind of a fun kind of place to start. Have you guys heard of or seen what's called the heel drop? Yeah, drop, right? Yeah. So it's basically a calf raise, 2 calf raises, and you come down. Oh wow! Right, and depending on I love this exercise because you can scale it. What kind of shoes am I wearing? What kind of surface am I on? How quickly am I letting myself drop? How much cushioning am I providing through my hips and knees? All those things can be scaled to where we are worried about an injury at the spine or a joint. We can even practice if you had like a chair or something where you can hold yourself. It's coming down very slow, giving your body a chance to perceive what impact is at a very low level, and you can slowly progress intensity over time. Really cool study came out a couple of years ago where they had participants start around 40 heel drops a day, and they progressed up to this is kind of a lot, like 100 to 110 heel drops a day, probably more than we need to do, but they saw real change, saw improvements in bone mineral density from that.
Instead of 10,
That's the beauty.
You don't do it.
Yeah, you don't have to rip off 110 in a row. Yeah. Yeah. So the level of entry, almost no barriers, very few barriers, and it can be spread out. It's really just a volume per day kind of a thing. So yeah, I've got ladies that are like brushing their teeth, let's get 10 here, whatever, but you can kind of slowly progress with that. But that's a fantastic way to start getting some impact. If you're not doing so. Yeah, great question. So we're perceiving impact straight from the heel, so we get a pretty good linear response of where the force is going through all the way through your femur, so long bone, pelvis, into our spine. So you're getting kind of got nervous for a second. Yeah, it's coming. That's a great question, but you are experiencing that all the way up through the spine. Because you can, if you are dropping, this is where I tell people you need to be worried about your mechanics. Never land stiff hip, stiff knee. Obviously, you're putting a ton of pressure on lumbar and knee. At the same time, you really kind of start feeling that in your head.
You ever start?
Yeah, so you can even add weight to it. So I prefer, if you get to the point where you are progressing and you're just trained, and you want to add some resistance to it, I prefer goblet hold, so I can hold it super close, touching my body. I can get my posture exactly where I want it. And I've got weight really close to my center of mass, so I can hold it right there. It's a really good way to do that.
If you have artificial joints,
yeah, so I think just in general, I'm always conservative regardless, because it's much easier to start here. You get a nice, see the progression, right? You even kind of have little peaks and valleys of how you're kind of seeing that trend line compared to, I did too much. Where was that cliff? Did I fall off here? Is it too much here? Is it too much here, right? So if you've never done a heel drop before, I always say, hey, impact is a whole different stimulus on your body, joints, soft tissue, muscles, all the stuff. So it's like, hey, what if I just started with like 20 in a day? And I start with maybe a softer surface just to kind of see how my body responds to it. And if in the moment, everything feels good, the rest of the day, everything feels good, the day following, everything feels good, stick with that for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Give your body a chance to understand what that level of intensity is. And then you can slowly add. I prefer to kind of add maybe repetitions up to 30 or 40 before I start experimenting with like maybe a faster drop or harder surface on my drop to drive impact up a little bit higher. So anything impacts goes slow.
Do you wear shoes or do you do it barefoot or what?
That's a good question. If you're not barefoot often, I probably start with some shoes on. If you are barefoot often, then you probably start, yeah. It's too cold. Yeah.
You ever start like someone maybe like back surgery or seated so they can slowly start building tolerance?
Yeah, so you could even try maybe like even kind of a marching with a stomp. That way you've got some level of support, and you're not getting full impact all the way up through the spine, but it at least gives you somewhere to start that's lower, right? So I would even, as conservative as you can possibly be, start there, because you would much prefer to, it's more of a mental thing. Am I willing to stretch this out for a year compared to I want to see changes in 3 months?
Yeah, sometimes you
Stop a little bit, yeah. Could, but yeah, I mean, you can stop. Are we perceiving that through the long bones and through the spine? Maybe not as much, but it at least gives your foot and your ankle some exposure. When we start doing a little bit more, it can have a little bit more of a resilience to it. Jumping jacks, great question. So it's kind of like the small bounding movements. There's a lot of soft tissue dampening that's happening like in our foot, so we don't experience a ton of impact. I love them because they're great for us, like neuromuscular, great for balance and coordination and stability. Any kind of small bounding movement is a fantastic characteristic we need to maintain. Is it enough for bone? Maybe not. But if you can do that, it's great. And that's a good point too, is do you have to have impact? If it's forcing yourself into a movement that you're not trusting yourself or you're not comfortable with, don't do it. Because there's so many other ways to progress other areas, right? So that's a great one kind of to keep in mind. If it's something that feels like it's too much, or I don't trust myself in this, let's kind of focus on other areas to see improvement in, and maybe come back to it. Or maybe I don't come back to it at all. I just like to bring up impact because the research is great. Not always for everybody right out of the gate. You can slowly progress into it and kind of see how your body responds. It's kind of a great way to look. Yeah. Oh, the rebounder. Yeah, rebounder. Yeah, what about jumping on a rebounder as far as impact? I'm a little torn because we're not getting, when you look at impact, if you look at it mathematically, this is kind of showing how big of a nerd I am, but impact is calculated by how long it takes for you, easy way to think about it, how long it takes for you to stop, right? So if you think about jumping and landing, this right here, I stop it very quickly compared to this, right? So my body came to a stop much slower the more I dissipated it. Impact is driven up by when time is very small. When you decrease your amount of time from moving to stopping, impact is higher. When you increase that amount of time, meaning I dampen those forces as I'm catching a ball and I slowly catch that ball, or I land and I come all the way down, but the deep squat position, impact is much smaller. So the rebounder, you're getting things like compressive extensive forces, but there's never really that rate where it's like stop. So I think you could likely, I think it's a good place to start. Just kind of get a feel for the jumping and the landing and the coordination of it all. Is it going to be enough impact long term? Probably not, because you really can't progress rebound. You can do more repetitions and more volume, but I think at some point it becomes like the running. I mean, your body understands that repetitive force is never changing. You know, I can accommodate that. I love the rebounder though. I think it's great. Do you have one? Yeah. Cardiovascularly, it's great too. So I would keep doing it for sure. Any kind of jumping is great for our bodies.
What about fake slams? Of I guess impact, like we'll do with like a med ball to just hard
Stops.
Like as
Yeah.
an entry point, like someone's not ready to do any jumping.
Yeah, I love it because you're getting exposure to higher velocity. And the velocity component is a big one to impact. It's much faster moving. Your body has to understand how to move with a higher level of speed and how to start and stop that. So I think if you can do meta squat slams, amazing, for sure. Yeah.
Something that you're talking about the hill drops, that's like starting point.
Great starting point.
Does your body over time, I'm assuming you add to that, whether it's jumping off a box or whatever,
Exactly.
does your body get adapted to it just like it does with running? Any other exercise we're talking about, you kind of get to that plateau.
It does. Yeah.
So you have to keep fixing those things.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good point. So that's where variety comes into play a little bit, giving your body different perspectives. You can progress the heel drop where you're loading it with external resistance. You're barefoot on a hard surface. You can see pretty good levels of impact. Where to progress from there? One that I really like that's doable for most people that you can do from home without equipment is if you have like stairs in your house, you can do what's called a freeze drop exercise, where you basically just step off the stair and land. Step off, land. So you're getting a little bit more exposure. It's greater than a heel drop, not quite like I'm not dropping off a 22-inch box, but it kind of gives you that stair step, no pun intended, into higher levels of impact. But eventually you can do counter movement jumps where you're jumping and landing, you're stepping off or jumping off of a box and landing. Those are definitely what I would categorize as probably higher intensity impact. And if you look at what's been seen in the literature, how much, we mentioned maybe a goal of 3 full body kind of resistance training days per week where you're doing your squats and your step ups and your farmer's carries, all those exercises, which I'm going to get a list for you guys here in a second. But how much impact is ideal? 1 to 2 days per week of higher intensity impact training. It's a good goal to shoot for if you can. Now, if you can't, don't force yourself into it. But if you're at a spot where you could do larger jumps or greater landing kind of mechanism movements, that's all you need. More isn't always better when it comes to higher intensity. Being smart with how much you do. Great point. Yeah, I would wear shoes for sure. Yeah, and landing too. It's like if you always wear shoes and you're rarely barefoot, it's a bigger stressor on your feet if you go straight to barefoot. So I would just do your barefoot shoes on. If you love being barefoot, you're a barefoot person, you're always barefoot, you could probably right, so what are some of the exercises that I like to do? I think this is a good takeaway spot. Is some of the most doable ones, probably the easiest as far as entry point, is the farmer's carry exercise. Yes, right? Maybe not. Many different ways to do this, but the easiest way is you're holding resistance, dumbbells or kettlebells in each hand and walking, or you're kind of, I always like to mix in some marching in place so we get some nice exposure. The unilateral one-sided hip, each kind of hip is taking on that weight. So that's an easy way to start. So you're picking up something that's heavy. How heavy should it be? I kind of aim for somewhere around maybe 30 to 45 seconds is kind of a good idea for a set, where it's like after maybe that, whatever you're picking up and you're walking, after 30, 35 seconds rolls around, you're like, man, it would feel really good to put this down. Right? That's kind of a good idea of how hard I need to be working. If you are worried about compression through the spine, the single-sided carry, where you're only holding weight in one hand and nothing in the other, you get less compression of the spine because you get much more engagement of all 4 abdominal wall muscles to provide the spine with stability. Right? If I hold weight in one hand, I go like that, right? So for my body to overcompensate, I have to really engage all 4 abdominal wall muscles to stand upright, and I don't get as much compression because I'm not holding as much weight in each hand. So a great way to slowly get into that without putting as much influence on the spine. 100%, 100%. Yeah, I usually mix and match both. I think both are valuable in your training. You can do overhead versions of it. You can do shoulder held versions, mix and match. You can have fun with the farmer's carry forever. That's a great one. Minimal technique, easy way to get to it. I'm a huge fan of the step up exercise. So finding a box or a platform where your hip and knee are somewhere around 90-ish degrees or slightly below that. So it's a decently high step, but it really puts your body through a large range of motion at the hip, right? And you can do that linearly, where you're stepping up onto the box all the way through, getting that full hip extension all the way to the top. You get that body weight. You can start with that. You can even do it. I've got people that do it with like assisted, doing it next to a chair or a countertop to get to the top to build some strength. I've had ladies that had to start with that with a countertop or a chair next to them, and now they're using like 50 pounds. So it can change.
How are you stepping down?
Yeah. So you're stepping down. Do we have a box?
Is there one there?
That's a great question. Yeah, you're not shooting for impact on this, because you're going to be at some point you're probably going to load this. Yeah, but your step will be second pretty good. So it's to the top, hips all the way through, down, controlled all the way off. And a nice little cue to remember when you're doing these is if you get too far forward on your stepping leg and you're starting to push through your knee or through your toes, you get much more quad activity, a lot more stress on your patellar. So if you have knee issues, it's going to be a killer. And if you stay further back and drive through midfoot to heel, you work much more through the hip and glute, and it puts very little stress on the knee. So I always say drive through heel, midfoot to heel, really squeeze those glutes, exhale all the way to the top, bring those hips through, control your step down. Because there's a lot of benefit strength-wise on this phase right here, the eccentric. Your muscle is lengthening and tension. Yeah, they're like 25 in each hand. But I've had ladies that could barely get a body weight 6 months later. So that's a great one to do. I pair that a lot of times with a lateral step up, because now I can work through more than one plane of motion. I can get both rotation and extension. So my bone is now seeing compression, deflection, and torsion, right? So you're getting all the signals for what your bone is hoping to see. Same exact cue though. Drive it through midfoot to heel, hips all the way through, exhale, squeeze those glutes to the top to really get the benefit of that. But body weight's a great place to start. You can load that many different ways, depending on kind of what your goal is.
You progress up to, about that high or.
No, if you really find that comfortable kind of mechanical 45 or 50 or 90 degree-ish kind of at the hip and the knee, and you just kind of progressively load that. That's a great one. Obviously like a squat exercise, another great movement. I always start that body weight. I even most of the times I start that with a chair or a bench, just so I can kind of build some strength and find a comfortable bottom position of your squat. I think a lot of people don't lack confidence with how far do I have to go. Can I get there? Can I get out of that position? Right. So finding a comfortable spot, reset your body, drive your knees out, keep those glutes squeezed top. So kind of starting in that position, then you can load that a lot of different ways too. But any kind of squat, step up, farmer's carry. I always say the deadlift exercise is the best and the worst exercise for bone health because you can progress it to the moon, right? Because you can really continue to do more and more resistance, but it's so technique based. And if you're, it doesn't always align perfectly with everybody. So if I'm not saying you have to do it, because I have people never touch the deadlift and see fantastic results. And I have people that just love it and they want to do it. They can perfect deadlift. No. I always start. All right, a couple ways you can do it. I always like to start with either a dumbbell or a kettlebell, and I have it vertical because I like to get the weight as far back, almost even with my center of mass as possible. That way I'm just moving straight up and down. I'm not having to reach for the resistance. I'm not shifting that where my weight is, because my levers are going to be my hips. And the further the weight gets to my body, it shifts that weight up. My lever becomes my lower spine. Okay. So I always start with a dumbbell or a kettlebell. I get it right in line with my heels as it falls over. And a couple of really nice cues. And if you have like a broomstick, anything, I usually teach you with that. But a couple of nice cues is a neutral spine, so my head through my spine to my tailbone, it all moves on one plane. See, my head kind of follows my spine. Makes a nice long lever. And then my shins are
side view too, so
are vertical. Yep. My shins stay vertical. That way I'm working through a huge lever. So I'm letting mechanics work for me. Then once I've got that down, here's my bottom position. I have that big lever to point right at my hips. I exhale, squeeze my glutes, come to the top position, and really get my hips back far as I'm pointing the bottom part of that, even back behind my heels, right? Forcing myself to really sit as far back as I can. Because if we don't, it turns into a squat, right? So most of my movement is coming from my hips compared to my knees. So you get a lot more action. So that's a great way to start. Sorry.
That flat back.
It does. Any kind of, if you can really maintain that neutral spine and exhale and brace through your abdominals, that's giving your support, the spine, the support. Because any movement you do, regardless of what you're doing, your spine is just searching endlessly for stability. You can get that through compression this way. You can get through compression this way. It doesn't matter. It just wants it. Right? We know the difference between. So, if you want to compress, to progress it with 2, is you can make, this is kind of your Romanian deadlift where you're not going all the way to the ground, right? A nice cue is that the technique is still the same, right? Inhale down, shoulders stay back, my weight's back on my midfoot to heel, my toes are, right? My shins are vertical, but I'm stopping when my hands get just past my knees. It's really all the further you need to go. So don't go all the way to the ground. It's gonna be way too far down, right? Find that kind of nice pivot point back up. Okay. So those are some easy ways to do it. So if you feel comfortable with that, I always start with the broomstick, and I put someone in front of a bench. I've got like my broomstick, my back. This is a fun drill you can do. You're at home. Just have like a chair or do it in front of your couch, and put your broomstick on your back. So I got my 3 points of contact between my tailbone, my thoracic spine, and my head. It's all moves in the same plane now. It's always in contact. It's the first thing you're going to lose is where the heck is my back? I bend over. No idea where it is. I need some feedback. If that's too difficult, you can hold it here. You just have it on pelvis, stomach, and head. Same exact thing. Right? Doesn't look as cool, but And then the vertical shin one's a tough one, so I always like to have like a bench or a chair in front of me, because the first thing you'll probably do is this. Right, as soon as I touch that, I know I moved in the wrong. So it's here, it's boom. My knees never touch my chair. That pole is always in contact with those 3 spots on my back. And if you can do those, you really, like, your body just naturally starts to move that way, because it can be efficient. Instead of to retrain it. But I would start with this, like glute bridge, warm up, then kind of go to this and practice this as much as you want. And it's making the connection. Don't just stand up. It's exhale as you stand. Forcefully exhale, kind of use your lips as a pressure valve. Right, forcing air out, which just makes my abdominals have to push it out. I'm telling myself, squeeze my glutes as much as I can. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. This hips all the way through. Relax, squeeze, 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 squeeze. That's
What's
really
the
good.
point of using that stick as opposed to without?
Just purely feedback.
Okay.
So you're just kind of giving a sense of where your body is in space. So you know for sure your neutral spine. I have those 3 points of contact. The proof stick. Exactly. Yeah, you're training your body to do it. Yep. Yeah.
My back's flat, I'm not sure, I can't.
You don't always have somebody marking your orders at you either, right? So it's just it's a really easy fail-safe move to do it. But again, great way to practice. I think even if you're never going to deadlift, you have no interest in it, just use this to practice it. This is going to help you just kind of fundamental movement in general. It's worth practicing. For sure, I can put together. Yeah, for sure. But those are some great ones. And then the last one, obviously, you can do a lot of big upper body pushes and pulls. But all those things kind of go hand in hand, because we need to build up as much strength and muscle mass as we can, just for functionality, protective of bones, and just being as strong as we can. So,
Would you just demonstrate for us the upper body when you got a dead weight in
shoulder press, yeah.
Please.
So if you look back at the, thanks for bringing this up. The Liftmore study, they did the barbell shoulder press. This was the movement they did. I've programmed the barbell shoulder press 0 times past 10 years. Because of the shoulder, if you look at the anatomy of our shoulder, if we're in what's called abduction at the shoulder, it's depending on the anatomy of your clavicle, you could some have a little bit more of a hook between the clavicle and where the shoulder joint and the scapula come together. It gets real clunky. It's like mine clicks right now. It's not super comfortable, right? If you go here, oh, that feels pretty good, right? Or maybe here, it feels pretty good, right? You can't do that with the barbell. So I always either do kettlebell and or dumbbell. You can do one-sided or two-sided, and I always let's just start with the elbow pointing forward, because that for 99% of people it's pretty fluid. Okay? And then you can always experiment with maybe going 30 to 45 degrees out to the side, and you'll find a really comfortable. I'd be really surprised if you could find something more comfortable in one of those 2 areas. But I always prefer, dumbbell compared to barbell. And if you're at home, not everybody's gonna have barbell. So that would be a great way to get some of that overhead vertical loading forces acting all the way through spine, hip to the floor, indirect spinal loading. That shoulder press.
Do you want to do cross body also?
Over here,
Unnecessary.
yeah, not necessary. Yeah, that's a good question. Probably went over time. We're pretty good at doing that. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Any
Thank you,
final
guys. Any other questions? Before we go? Yeah, so it's likely the biggest contributor. But like I mentioned before, if we only do impact, we don't have kind of the strength and resilience at the soft tissue level to keep it impact. Yeah. So I think the loading resistance training is part of it. But what kind of like really turns the thermostat up is more of the impact. That's great.
When did the full osteoporosis?
I know, right?
Not 100 years.
No. They probably did for sure. And like even more like, World War II times when like food rations and stuff were low, probably was a big driver. Nobody even knew about it. But I think it's realistically, my thoughts on that are most people are not convinced that the healthcare system is set up for them. And they're becoming much more self-educated on other avenues of my health. And I think they're starting to realize that, that's one big issue is like internally now looking more into it, more eyeballs are getting. It's just my guess.
Yeah.
Oh, if you're -4+, they're probably freaked out.
I'm not taking that.
All the stuff. I know. Most of the meds out there, the side effects aren't good.
Yeah, breaking bones.
Breaking bone is a side effect.
Yeah.
A lot of as funny as it is, most of the medication stops both breakdown and growth, and it just kind of locks you, freezes you in time. But part of the most important part is you have to basically eat the old bone to layer on new strong bone. So if I'm just always maintaining old bone, it becomes really, really fragile over time. So
Some of the medicine you last side, they don't,
exactly.
they do what you were saying, and then there's new ones that are in the osteoblast that but they're out there, can't afford them because your insurance will pay for them.
Sure. Yeah. One thing you can always control is exercise, right? You can always get stronger. You can always get stronger. Totally into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's your life,
Yeah.
and nutrition, of course. So it is possible.
Oh yeah.
Not to say that you can beat osteoporosis, but it is totally possible to improve your bone mineral density without any medication.
Great question.
I can actually respond to that.
Go ahead.
I just had my bone density done yesterday.
Did you really?
Did. And I actually increased a couple numbers. And it wasn't on your plan either. It's just that I've been trying to focus on strengthening and impacting and doing it on a regular basis.
The consistency.
How
So-
long does it take to do it? Like, how long have
Did
you
it-
been doing the resistance?
Oh, I've been
Loading.
exercising at the gym forever.
Right.
So,
So
But
year over
now-
year, your numbers go.
A little more intentional.
no, just yesterday, I improved over last year.
Yes,
what
right.
I'm saying.
That's amazing. No medication, no hormone therapy.
Yeah, we had a client, she reversed osteoporosis to osteopenia. We've had a few clients who need to, right?
That's great. And realistically, even if you maintain and get stronger, that's a huge win also. That's not, yeah, that's a good question. Not the best question for me though. Yeah.
I'm a registered dietitian.
It kind of goes back to the root cause of if vitamin D is there, where is it going? If it's not going to the right place, taking more is not going to do any better.
And
Yeah.
they always say, get it through your food. That's
Yeah,
what they
real
say.
food. Eat real food for sure.
When the client reversed it, her doctor was like, no one ever does that. What are you doing? Like really consistent with exercise, really dialed in on my nutrition, increase my protein, fiber. And the doctor's like, oh yeah, no one will do that.
Well, sure, yeah. that's the rest.
It's frustrating.
Unless you
They
do.
don't push for more.
Unless you're here. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Nice.
That's amazing. That's super cool to see. Thanks, y'all. It was fun.
Thank you.
Before we go, or maybe after you stop this, would you explain a little bit about your training process or your training?
Yeah, let me turn this on recording.